Just before we come to that, we'll just give a bit of a summary on what's occurred leading up to this point. We're in the era or the age of 400 BC, in the mid-400 BCs, when Ahasuerus is the king of Persia, and of course some generations have passed of kings since Cyrus and the invasion of Babylon and Persia taking stronghold, and through that allowing the Jews to return to Jerusalem and others to venture into different realms. And the setting here is in Shushan, which we would know today as Iran. That's how we know Persia today, Iran. But Shushan itself was actually in Iran as we know it today. I'll call Ahasuerus Xerxes. I'll call him by his Greek name. It's much easier to pronounce all the time, so I don't get tongue-tied. So I'll call him Xerxes. He was known as Xerxes. But Xerxes was a man of great wealth, a king of great wealth, fifth king of Persia, loved money, loved women, loved anything he could get his hands on, loved being the power monger of the age. So therefore, of course, he wanted to invade Greece all the time, but he couldn't find enough to conquer the Greeks at this period of time. So what happens is we're at a stage now where he's having this 180-day feast. And he's invited all his captains and those who are in charge of the different provinces that he had in the Persian Empire surrounding him. He's invited them all in, and they're having this great feast. 180 days of, Xerxes being able to show everyone how powerful he is and how much wealth he has. And then they get to this 7-day period of having what they call a drinking feast for just the men, which is the macho thing to do, isn't it? No. Before I was a Christian, I knew what it was like to have a 1-day drinking feast. And I knew the ramifications of that, so I don't know what it was like to have a 7-day drinking feast. But anyway, they did. And during that time and in their drunkenness, the king decides to call his queen, who was the most beautiful woman, Vashti, to come and parade herself before the men. And of course she declines to do that, and that brings about her demise. Because she wouldn't come as the king commanded her. So therefore, after a period of time, those within the council of Xerxes say to him, "We will bring all virgins to you, so that you can choose a new queen from amongst the most beautiful women in your kingdom." And you've got to remember there's Jews living there. But Mordecai was a man who kept silent for this period of time concerning who he was in his heritage. He also had instructed Esther to be silent at this time concerning her heritage as a Jew. And Esther was the most beautiful young virgin girl. So when they go out, Esther is one of the ones that is chosen to be taken and prepared to be put before the king for selection. Now that time of preparation takes 12 months for them to be presented to the king. So Esther goes through that with a number of other women. And then they are paraded And of course, as we know, Esther would become the queen. The king, at this point in time, has no knowledge that she is a Jew. She was raised by Mordecai, who was her uncle because her parents died. And Mordecai would have raised her to be a good Jewish girl. But he's told her to be silent. Not to tell the king that she is a Jew. And of course, the king selects her and she becomes his queen. Then during that period of time, Mordecai, because he lets the king know about a conspiracy that's going on, gets given a prominent position within the king's province or within his empire as being the gatekeeper at Shushan, which is a privileged position. But then comes an Amalekite by the name of Haman. He was from the tribe of Amalekite. That was his genealogy, of the Amalekites. And as you know, the Amalekites what? Hated the Jews. They were enemies of the Jews. And then one day when Haman is put into this prominent position and he goes out into the city streets, the command was for everyone to bow to Haman. Now when we look at Haman biblically through the Bible, Haman is a foreshadow of Antichrist. And Haman wants everyone to bow to him. A bit like Nebuchadnezzar wanted everyone to bow to him. A bit like Pharaoh wanted everyone to bow to him. Do you see this sequence of events going through history that foreshadows the coming Antichrist? And that's what I mean by Haman being a foreshadow of Antichrist, a type of Antichrist. But Mordecai won't bow. Because Mordecai only worships one God. He knows the first command. You shall worship no other God before me. Haman had set himself up like a god, wanting everyone to bow to him. A bit like the Pope, isn't it? The Pope of Shushan. Bow to me as I come along in my Pope-mobile, which has got a mane instead of a clutch. But that's what we're looking at. But Mordecai is faithful to God. And we come to this place now where Haman, because of what Mordecai has done, has a hatred for him. But not only for him, but for everyone associated with him, because one thing Haman has done is discover the heritage of Mordecai. That he is a Jew, and that's why he will not bow to him. So he then gets the king and tricks the king into putting out a decree that all the Jews are to be destroyed by a certain date, by a certain period of time in history. And that decree goes out. And that brings us to where we are in chapter 4. That was a brief overview. I hope it brings you up to speed for chapter 4. And it tells us here that after this decree has gone out, and Mordecai learned all that had happened, verse 1, what is the first thing he does? He tears his clothes and puts on sackcloth and ashes and goes out into the midst of the city. Suddenly, everybody is going to discover the heritage of Mordecai and the God that he worships. He does that by putting sackcloth and ashes on and going out into the midst of the city. This is also a sign to all the other Jews that because of this decree, it is now a time of mourning. It is a time of fasting. It is a time of bringing oneself to a total place of humility before God. To a place of utter despair before God. They would wear the sackcloth made of goat's hair, camel's hair, that would itch their skin and put ashes over themselves. To cry out for mercy. Because they knew that there was only one way out of this. And that was through divine intervention. That without divine intervention, the Jews were not going to exist anymore. Because Haman's decree went out to all the provinces. All the provinces, even into Jerusalem. For all the Jews to be destroyed. But we're going to discover something about Mordecai before we even get to Esther. We're going to discover that Mordecai is a man of faith. A real man of faith. And I'll explain more. He goes out in the midst of the city, cries out with a loud and bitter voice. He went as far as the front of the king's gate, for no one might enter through the king's gate clothed with sackcloth. You see, being clothed in sackcloth and having ashes wasn't something that other nations didn't know about. Other nations even performed this type of symbolic expression in a time of mourning or fasting. You can confirm that in Isaiah 15:3 and Ezekiel 27:30 that other nations also did this. But he even goes right up to the king's gate. Mordecai does that intentionally. He knows that God has appointed him for this time in history. God has told him to go right up to the king's gate. Because you know why? That was going to get the attention of those that served upon Esther. The eunuchs, the handmaids, they would have seen what was going on. They would have heard the commotion. It would have been spoken about within the king's grounds. That the Jews were in sackcloth and were mourning. You see, Esther wouldn't even hear about these things. The kings and queens weren't to hear about such trivial things as this. It wasn't to be brought to their attention. But here we see by what Mordecai does, and does so openly, is that Mordecai is not afraid of his identity. He's happy to display his identity publicly. So should we. We should display our identity publicly. Did not Jesus say that a man must bear his cross? Isn't that a public thing? So when we're dying to self, shouldn't others be seeing that? Yes, they should. We should not be afraid of our identity. And we should not even fear those that can take our lives, but we should fear the one that takes the body and the soul upon death, not just the body. So Mordecai goes right up to the gate. And it goes on and says, in every province where the king's command and decree arrived, there was great mourning among the Jews, fasting, weeping, wailing, and many lay sackcloth and ashes. So Esther's maids and eunuchs came and told her. See? That's why he went to the king's gate. And the queen was deeply distressed, as she would be. She loved Mordecai. She doesn't understand why he's dressed in sackcloth, why he's mourning, why he's fasting. So what does she do? She sends garments to Mordecai to take his sackcloth away from him. But guess what? He won't accept it. Doesn't matter what, he's not going to hide his identity. He is a Jew. And he worships one God. And if it means by not bowing to Haman that he must die, then he will die. That's the decision he's made. So no matter what comes now, doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. He's a man of faith. He's a man who puts his trust in God. He knows that God calls them to put on the sackcloth, put on the ashes, and to fast, and to weep, and to mourn. He knows that. He knows he should do that. Jeremiah has told them that that is something they should do as a nation. We'll look that up. That's Jeremiah 6:26. The 8th century prophet Joel told them to do this. So Mordecai does it because God commands it. Then Esther calls Hatak, one of the king's eunuchs. This would have been a eunuch that served on her personally like the right-hand man to Esther. And she gave him a command concerning Mordecai to learn what and why this was. So Hatak went out to Mordecai in the city square that was in front of the king's gate. And Mordecai told him all that had happened to him and the sum of money that Haman had promised to pay into the king's treasuries to destroy the Jews. Oh, money is the root of all kinds of evil. Money and wealth was the weakness of Xerxes. And that's what Haman presented to him. What did he present to him? 10,000 talents of silver. Do you know what that is? It's around about $1 billion. Not bad, eh? $1 billion. All you've got to do is sign the decree. I don't even know if he even looked at it. Or all he's seen were dollar signs. Or in his case, talents of silver that he could weigh and put in his treasury. He also gave Mordecai told him all that had happened and the sum of money that Haman had promised to pay to the king's treasuries to destroy the Jews. He also gave him a copy of the written decree for their destruction, which was given at Shushan, so that he might show it to Esther and explain it to her, and that he might command her to go to the king and to make supplication to him and plead before him for her people. So Hatak returned and told Esther the words of Mordecai. What we're seeing here is Mordecai's faith. He has faith in God, but he has a faith in Esther. He's placing faith in God, he's placing faith in Esther. Why? He raised her. She knew about her God. She knew all the stories of the forefathers and what had happened and what this God had done for them. Of course, they all knew what happened in the days of Moses, when Moses led them out of the captivity in Egypt to the promised land. They knew the stories of how God had provided for their people. How he had done the miraculous and intervened into their lives at the pivotal points when they needed him the most. But listen, then Esther spoke to Hatak and gave him a command for Mordecai. You see, remember, Mordecai is a gatekeeper. She can command him. She's the queen. Then Esther spoke to Hatak, gave him a command for Mordecai. All the king's servants and the people of the king's provinces know that any man or woman who goes into the inner court to the king, who has not been called, he has but one law: put all to death except the one to whom the king holds out the golden scepter, that he may live. Yet I myself have not been called to go into the king these 30 days. We see Esther balk at what Mordecai has asked her to do. And she sends this command back to him through Hatak. She commands Hatak to tell him these words. That she has this hesitancy because the king hasn't seen her for 30 days. She hasn't been called to the king for 30 days. So she's worried. She's anxious. But then Mordecai, with all the wisdom given from God to a faithful man, told them to answer Esther with this. Listen to these wise words. Do not think in your heart that you will escape in the king's palace any more than all the other Jews. So whether you do this, Esther, or don't do this, you're going to die with the rest of us. Because guess what? You're a Jew. You're a Jew. Can you imagine Esther at that moment? A bit like all of us in our faith, isn't it? When the rubber meets the road, what do? Do you balk? Do you hesitate? Oh, God didn't really say that. Well, Satan whispers that in your ear, the same as he spoke to Eve. Did God really say that? Oh, I don't think so. I've made an error. There's an obstacle here. There's a Xerxes that can have my head taken off. How many of us balk when the rubber meets the road and the rubber's met the road here for Esther? What are you going to do? You're going to continue to try and hide? Or you're just going to step out in faith? What do you got to lose? Your life. And what happens in losing your life? You've saved your life. Especially if you've done it for God, Barry.
You saved your life to lose it.
That's it, right. So Mordecai shows great wisdom here in his statement, doesn't he? There's 3 points to Mordecai in his argument. One point is Esther is not exempt from destruction. We've just covered that. But then he goes on in verse 14. Listen to this. Here comes the faith of Mordecai, absolutely gleaming from him, shining from him. He says this, "For if you remain completely silent at this time," remember there's a time for all things under heaven. She had a time to be silent, but this is not the time to be silent, this is the time to speak. Okay? There's a time to be silent, there's a time to speak. Go on, go into Ecclesiastes chapter 3. It's a time for all things. For goodness sake. But the wisdom here. "For if you remain completely silent this time, relief and deliverance will arise to the Jews from another place. But you and your father's house will perish." That's the faith of Mordecai. God's purpose will be fulfilled with or without you, Esther. If you don't serve God's will in your life, Kevin, he'll get someone else to do it. And you and your household will perish. You unfaithful servant. Wicked man. I'll get Barry up here preaching a minute. Which one? They're both. You see, Mordecai knows he's God. He has the conviction concerning his God that his God will fulfill his will. So Mordecai is also holding fast to the covenant promise that was made to Abraham. There was a covenant promise made to Abraham. Genesis chapter 12, verse 3. Genesis chapter 17, verses 1 through to 8. The promise. Let's read it. Genesis 12, that'll do. Let's go there. Genesis 12. Mordecai knows this. And he's standing on this promise. Now the Lord had said to Abram, "Get out of your country, from your family, from your father's house, to a land that I'll show you. I will make you a great nation. I will bless you and make your name great. You shall be a blessing." Listen. "I will bless those who bless you, and I will curse him who curses you. And in you all the families of the earth shall be blessed." 17. Go there. 17. When Abram was 99 years old, the Lord appeared to Abram and said to him, "Gee, Abram wasn't finished with the Lord at 99. Gosh, so many people retire at 65. I am Almighty God. Walk before me and be blameless, and I will make my covenant between me and you, and will multiply you exceedingly." Then Abram fell on his face, and God talked with him, saying, "As for me, behold, my covenant is with you, and you shall be a father of many nations. No longer shall your name be called Abram, but your name shall be Abraham, for I made you father of many nations. And I will make you exceedingly fruitful, and I will make nations of you, and kings shall come from you. And I will establish my covenant between me and you, and your descendants after you in their generations." Listen. for an everlasting covenant to be God to you and your descendants also to you. Also I give to you and your descendants after you the land in which you are a stranger, all the land of Canaan as an everlasting possession, and I will be their God. He's holding fast to that. That God will bless them and curse those that come against them. God has always done that, looked after the Jews, and he will always look after the Jews. He started with the Jews, he finishes with the Jews. God loves the Jews. He says, bless them. Bless Israel, you'll be blessed. Curse them and I'll curse you. By blessing them means by bringing the gospel to them. Not by keeping them in their Judaism, by the way. If you want to be a blessing, give them the gospel. And here we go. The third response of Mordecai in his argument. The words of 14b, verse 14, section B. Yet who knows whether you have come to the kingdom for such a time as this? God's providence. God foreknows all things, God foresees all things. Esther was born at a time that God appointed her to be born. She was always going to be raised by Mordecai. God knew that because of his providence. He knew that he would raise her up to be a queen for such a time as this. To be the one who would bring salvation to the Jews. Mordecai was born for such a time as this. Esther was born for such a time as this. What were you born for? What was I born for? Such a time as this. We live in this period of time, and each and every one of us has a purpose within that.
Yes.
God has a plan and a purpose for every single person sitting here today. Like Mordecai. That's honest, Barry. Esther was in this place, this time, for this purpose. So what does she do? Esther told them to reply to Mordecai, go, gather all the Jews who are present in Shushan and fast for me. Neither eat nor drink for 3 days, night or day, my maids and I will fast likewise. And so I will go to the king, which is against the law, and if I perish, I perish. Do you know what? She's not in a state of fatalism here, you know. Her faith has just been built up. There's a bit of a Joshua now that's rose up in her. As for me and my house, I will serve the Lord. Faith, she's been encouraged, she's been convicted through the words of Mordecai. She is now looking to a God, if I perish, I perish. But not in an expectancy to perish. Why? Because she's calling for a fast. She's calling for everyone to come to a fast. She's echoing the words of the 8th century prophet Joel. Now therefore says the Lord, 2:12, turn to me with all your heart, with me in all humility. Cry out to me. I will hear your cries. And I will deliver you, says the Lord. I will give you what is needed for the time, because I raised you up for such a time as this. Do you think I'm going to leave you and forsake you at this time? No! I will never leave and forsake you. If I perish, I perish. Oh, doesn't that echo the words of Meshach, Shadrach and Abednego? Hey? Chapter 3, go and read it for yourself later. When they're about to be thrown into the furnace. Oh, what beautiful words they had, didn't they? Concerning that. Daniel 3, I'm going to read it. Yeah, it's a long sermon. Bad luck. Daniel chapter 3, verses 17 and 18. Listen to this one, Nebuchadnezzar, when they wouldn't bow to him. So he's going to put them in this fiery furnace. And let me tell you, it was fiery because the guys that let them up there, they got burnt. And they weren't even thrown in. If that is the case, listen, this is when they've said they're not going to bow. If that is the case, our God whom we serve is able to deliver us from the burning fiery furnace, and he will deliver us from your hand, O King. But if not, let it be known to you, O King, that we do not serve your gods, nor will we worship the gold image which you have set up. If I perish, I perish. But blessed be the name of the Lord. Can you say that in the face of imminent death? You're nodding yes. I hope you can. I'd like to think I am able to do that. To stand for God in the face of death and say, well, if I perish, I perish, but I will not bow to you. Let me tell you something. It's one of the things Islam does to Christians just before they kill them, is ask them to denounce their God and turn to Allah. And bow before Allah, facing man. Could you do it? With a sword in your throat. Could you do it? My grace is sufficient. If I perish, I perish. She had come to the kingdom for such a time as this. These words, if I perish, are a declaration, not a fatalism, but a declaration that shows courage and faith. You know, and I am finishing, the most important matter that should arise in the heart of a Christian is in fulfilling God's will wherever they've been placed. You know, we need to be doing what Esther calls to be done here. Every day we should be doing this. Renting our heart out to God. Preparing ourselves for whatever we may face that day. Taking the opportunity as it avails itself, knowing that God goes before us. That we have been raised for such a time as this, whether it's in your workplace, whether you work for the church, whether you're a missionary, for such a time as this you have been raised up. And to bring salvation, because you have the words that bring salvation. Mordecai, in the providence of God, had come to the kingdom for such a time as this. Mordecai's faith stirred Esther's faith. Faith begets faith. And she come to understand that this was her time. It was her time to stand up boldly, to challenge the king, to challenge Haman, and to bring salvation to her people. What is God's providence for you and for me? We live in an evil age. Wealth is their God. Wealth is destroying souls everywhere. We live in a wealthy country. Are you prepared to go out there? Are you prepared to put on the sackcloth and rent clothes? Are you prepared to openly bear who you are in front of everybody? Do you pray in public, or do you only say grace at home? Are you ashamed, or are you proud? Are you proud of the identity of who you are now? You are a child of the living God. So let's take on that challenge, Merriweather. We've got a new year ahead of us. So let's get out there and bring salvation to those that are dying, to those that are under the hand of the Haman of today. Because let me tell you, there are many antichrists working within the world system today. So let's boldly proclaim the truth of salvation coming through our Lord and Saviour Jesus Christ and through no other way. And may the Lord bless us for this day.